Hi, this is Jeffrey Kurt Financial Group. Today's Monday, July 20, 2026. Quick look back at last week. Stocks got sold off in the U.S. last week. Dow was down about 1%, S&P down 1.5-ish, and the NASDAQ was the worst, down almost 3%. Year to date, S&P and Dow and NASDAQ all up between 8.5% and 10%. Russell leading the way in the upper teens, that type of gain for the year to date. Looking ahead, it's going to be a very busy week from an earnings perspective. We're kicking in, and I could go on for probably 7 or 8 minutes just reading off the roster of all the companies that are reporting this week. But some of the big ones and some of the key ones, and some of the ones I think everyone will be looking at is Tesla and Google are on Wednesday. Tomorrow on Tuesday, GE, GM, Halliburton, Coke, and Capital One. And then on Thursday, Intel, GE, Verona, and Lockheed Martin were some of the other big ones I saw, but Intel's going to be the big one in the technology. On Friday, Verizon and American Express were some of the big ones I saw. But again, this is a very brief picking of all the companies going to be reporting this week. And the next 2 weeks, I think, are really important. A lot of people kind of look, again, earnings season, but also then what happens in the Middle East. We continued the bombing. Now there's a couple of U.S. servicemen and women killed. And what happens? Do we get a resolution? Does the bombing escalate? What happens to the Strait of Hormuz? These things I think are going to move the markets as well as the earnings. And then finally, the Kimi K3 AI platform. Does that continue to disrupt the AI story here in the U.S., which has been driving so much of the economy and the markets? Let me finish with this. I think this is a very interesting and important point. And I got this from the Kobasi report. They're on Twitter, X if you want. It's a good follow. They're out there. They're on TV a lot too. But what they pointed out was that hedge funds are selling tech stocks rapidly. In 6 of the 8 last weeks, the hedge funds have been selling these stocks. It brings the 8-week total sales to the largest in the last 10 years. And here's a graph. We'll put the graph up here that comes along with this information. And last week alone, technology stocks were the most sold sector by the hedge funds. As a result, the percentage of exposure by the hedge funds to technology has been reduced. And I think, again, this is pretty important if it continues. Or, I also, why. They didn't really talk about why the hedge funds are selling tech, but that's an important thing. But also, this is a lot of selling. And in the midst of what's supposed to be, the AI build out with all the chips and software and all the companies, and the hedge funds are getting out. So something, again, to be aware of. Try to follow and see what the influence of the rest of the market might be. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share, and then send along any questions you may have. Look forward to them. Thank you again. Goodbye.